So, welcome into our boots. Oh wait, what's this? No altar? What? Yeah, we're gonna do things a little bit different today. So the service is gonna be maybe not what you're used to, and that's okay, right? I have a point behind doing this. So I'm gonna get into that ahead of time. We're gonna do the normal order of service is not gonna be what we do today. So, as we're out at the exercise, and yes, we're still at the exercise, so I won't have much of a chance to, to spend too much time after the service. But we had a notional casualty, and the question was asked, do we have what we need to do, like a memorial? Do we have what we need to do to take care of casualties? Chaplain, do you have what we need to, so that you can do the memorial, or so you can do the ministry to these wounded and injured and dead? And I said, okay, well, yes, I do. It's all in my nice little bag right over here. Yay! So most of you have seen this. This is my chaplain kit, my field chaplain kit. Obviously I have my stole and my mala, which would normally go in this pocket. So I sat there and I was puzzling with myself, and I was like, you know what? We haven't talked about what goes on the altar and why, right? Everything that goes on to the altar, everything that we put up, everything that you guys normally see up here is 100% intentional. There is nothing that goes up here that is not fully thought through. Why? Because it matters, right? We don't just put stuff up here because it looks nice. We don't just put stuff up here because it's fun, right? We do this for a reason. Everything that's up here, it has a purpose, has a point. And so we're going to put everything up, and I'm going to talk about each and every one of them. Both the normal stuff, and then the stuff that's in my kit, which is basically a smaller version of all of that. So that's what we're going to do today, right? Because I want you guys to think through not just go through the motions of like, yeah, we can chant a little bit, and then we'll do a little meditation, and then we'll do some reading, right? That's nice, and that's important. That's really, really important. But you know what's also important? Being intentional. Being very deliberate about what you do. And as we go through this one, I really want you to think about that. Like, what are we not only putting on the altar, but what are we putting in our lives, and why do we do so? Let's think about how we can be very intentional in our lives. All right? So we'll start off with the big one for the normal altar. So you guys are actually getting like a little bit of a behind the screen, behind the mirror kind of stuff. Normally this stays back here, right? Okay, so the first thing that has to go on, and again, we're doing this to think through intentions, the things that matter, why do we do them, why do we put these things in our lives, why do we put these things on this space. The first thing that we do is we have, and I have in fact glued the edges together so that they stay. I chose to do this one this way for a very particular reason. It has 8 points, symbolizing the Eightfold Noble Path. And this one always goes down first. This is always the first thing that goes down. Because, simply put, we, from the very beginning, right, and back in the Buddhist day, you would have put down a special cloth so that when a teacher came, right, you would put down that special cloth so the teacher could sit, and it was a gesture of respect, right? It was a gesture of saying, look, you matter. And so this is us looking at it and saying, this is you matter. All right. The next thing that goes up there is a kind of a little seat. Now, a lot of times I will just leave it in the box depending on how much time I have. But this is, we use this as a kind of a seat because in most cultures, those who are given a position of respect are given a position that is slightly raised, right? You are raising the person up symbolically by putting them up physically. So we have our box, we have our seat. Next, we have to put up the cloth that goes over that. I chose this because this is the so-called International Buddhist flag, and it's a kind of a way that we can say, yeah, this is the thing that we practice. So, it goes up here. You know what? Let me move you guys up a little bit. We're gonna move everybody up. See what you guys got. So you guys can see. Okay. And see if we can scooch down a little bit. Okay, now you guys can see, right? So we have our cloth, we have our seat, which is covered with a cloth as well. Now why we do that is, again, the gesture of respect. It's a respect for the teacher, right, in this case. And here we have our teacher, right? So obviously the actual Buddha is long since passed. And this is a symbolic representation of said Buddha, right? So this is us recognizing that we had a teacher who taught us some things, and it was really important, right? So he goes up here, all right? So, teacher in his slightly raised position is put up here. And this, so when we're looking at it from this standpoint, from this side, right, we would be kind of like the teacher is looking at us and teaching and giving us some instruction, right? So here we have the Buddha kind of giving some instruction. Well, there are a lot of different ways that we would show respect. And one of the ways, actually, before I get to that, one of the words that we would normally use or that most religious traditions would use, respect, is found in this other word, right? The word worship. Bear with me here, right? The word worship actually comes from this other word, right? Or it actually, it comes from a much older word, and that word is wordskip, right? And so word would be worthy. So we find something to be worthy, but what's this skip, right? Skip is respect. Worthy of respect, worthy of honor, worthy of listening to, right? So we have a teacher who we believe is worth listening to, so we give him that respect, all right? The next thing that goes on the altar is all of the things that, like, you wouldn't want your teacher to come in and just be, like, obviously the Buddha would come in and teach just because, right? He's not going to sit there and be like, oh, well, you got to pay me money to teach. No, he's going to come in and be like, okay, I got something to teach, I'm going to teach. Now, we, in return, choose all kinds of different ways to show that. So the ways that we normally will show that is, and there's all kinds of different ways, again, there's all kinds of different ways of figuring out the layout for this. Some parts of like the Pure Land schools and most of the Japanese schools will have like a single candle right about here. Let me see if I can't scoot you guys back just a little bit so we can. Maybe that will work. Better? Yeah, well, kind of. So there, a lot of times the people like the Pure Land schools will have a candle, and over here they'll have a water or something representing. All of these are symbolic representations, right? The candle represents light. It also represents impermanence, because ultimately that candle is going to burn down and, burn until it's gone, and then it's gone. That's the whole point, right? It's impermanent. It's not supposed to last. It's not supposed to be burning forever and ever. Now, some schools, this is a lot of the Theravadan schools, kind of like a more symmetrical kind of approach. So they'll put another candle here, and we honor them by doing so. A lot of the Tibetan schools then will also have a series of lamps, oil lamps, or butter lamps, that they will light, and those are, butter was expensive, right? To some degree, kind of still is, but it's not that expensive anymore. But back then, it really was expensive, right? So if you were putting up butter lamps, it was, especially the purified butter stuff, right? What we call ghee. That was very pricey. And so that was a sign that you valued the teaching that you were receiving from the teacher by doing so, right? By presenting that. A lot of times we will also put some variation of flowers. Now, for me, the way that I've always done this, I put one on each side, and yes, they're supposed to match, and does the color of the flowers matter? Not really. It's the act of giving them that matters, right? Now, I put one on either side because the Buddha was born under, twin sal trees or twin sala trees, right? And so I kind of try to represent that. From the time that he was born, he had something about him that we kind of knew was a little different. You guys will see this when we start getting towards Vesak and we start doing the Vesak service, right? And I'm seeing the comments, I am, right? I'm reading them. Okay. So I do see that comment about the colors of the so-called Buddhist flag. There are 5 different types of compassion that are represented by each of the colors. If you ask me offhand, I'm not going to be, I don't remember them. That might be another topic for a service later, maybe. So, actually, yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. We'll go ahead and do that. Maybe not. Well, maybe next time. We'll see. But moving back to the flowers, right, or moving back to the trees, right, the flowers. Flowers represent something that is, like, anybody who's gone to a florist recently knows that flowers are expensive. Flowers are pricey. Obviously, I don't have the time to necessarily go and get flowers every single week, so I use the simulated ones. The point there, it doesn't really matter if they're the simulated ones or if they're the real ones. It's the intention behind them. It's the intention behind the flowers and saying, yes, these are precious things. These are of value. I'm giving them to you because I find value in the teachings that you give. Right? I find value in the things that you are helping me to learn. So that's why we have the flowers, right? In a similar way, And I'm actually going to go ahead and put the candles on there. We'll use the the shorter candles this week as well. I'm going to go ahead and light them. Okay, so we've got our candles, we've got our that represent impermanence, we have our flowers that represent something of value, and the fact that we recognize that there's something important about this particular teacher. The next thing that is going to go on there is representations of fruit, because fruit back then did not last. It really didn't. Fruit would have fallen apart very quickly. It would have begun to rot. It would have begun to get overripe, and then it's not all that good, right? So if you're going to give fruit, you're giving something that you know isn't going to last and is expensive, right? Again, coming back to themes of impermanence, coming back to themes of generosity, coming back to themes of value, and recognizing what the teacher has to offer. Now, I always put 4 of each. You will notice also that the cakes, the simulated cakes, are basically matching the colors on the flag as best I could, right? I couldn't quite get there exactly, but I came close. Right? We have red, we have orange, we have green, which I'm using as white navy. We also have blue, right? And these are facing a very specific way, a very specific direction, right? The whole point here is you have the Buddha, you have the Dharma, and you have the Sangha, and you have yourself who is the student, right? So you are kind of taking refuge in this way. You can kind of symbolically take refuge in what we call the triple gem, or the 3 jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And the Buddha will always be facing that direction, always be facing towards the Buddha. Right? And the same goes for the cakes, right? Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, facing that way. So there's all kinds of intention there. It's very specific, very intentional. The next thing that goes on the altar, facing the right direction, incense. Why would we put incense on? What point does incense serve to put on the altar, other than the simple reality that, yes, incense does in fact, it is impermanent. It burns for a very limited time, and then it's gone. But it also allows us to remember the Buddha's teaching that the scent, the fragrance of incense and flowers and things like that, perfume, right? Those things cannot, if there's a gust of wind, the scent will not travel against the wind, right? The smoke will not travel against the wind. It will travel with the wind. Now, the Buddha's teaching, however, is that good works, good deeds, the things that we do, the good actions that we take, those travel in every direction. And so it's important not to get stuck on the things that smell nice, or the things that look nice, or the things that maybe sound nice, but the things that do good, the things that have actions that have value. And we symbolize that by lighting the incense. Come on, there we go. Now, you would never blow on it with your mouth, right? You can blow on it with your hand, but that's only to simply blow it out, right? You wouldn't want to blow it out with your mouth because that might be, in a way, there's a lot of parts of the tradition that might see that as like spitting on that truth, right? The truth that we just talked about, where that good deeds matter. So you would never, 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 never blow it out with your mouth. You would always blow it out with your hand. Or simply let it get to the point where the incense is starting to go on its own. Okay, the next thing that we have that we put, it's not really on the altar itself. Well, I guess in some parts of the tradition you would put it on the altar. We don't, because I have to find a way to utilize it, and that is the bell. Right? And the bell sounds as a way of inviting. We invite the bell to sound to, because the bell is an invitation to learn, an invitation to be aware. The bell is an invitation to awaken ourselves, to kind of like alert us to something that we need to be doing, right? And that is having that awareness. So as we have that awareness, we are, that's why we put the bell. Again, some parts of the tradition would put it on there, would put it actually on the altar. We don't necessarily have the space to do that, and also I would have to stand up and then sit down and stand up and sit down, and that doesn't lead to that leads to a more disjointed service that is not going to be as productive in helping people to, in helping those who attend to actually practice, because they're going to be constantly looking back and forth, and that, as we say with meditation, right? If your eyes are wandering, if your hands are wandering, so is your mind. So I try to minimize that as best I can. So our bell goes down right by my meditation cushion. And now we have the base of our altar nicely built. Right? I am also going to see if we have enough space. No, we don't. Okay, so I'm going to move the camera once again, and we're going to go take a look at my portable altar, the ones that I use in a field service, and the ones that if one of my personnel needs it, I have it there. All right. So I'm actually going to shift you guys up here so you can see a little bit better. Okay, main pocket. Oh, and I have some extra tools. Mala, which I use normally for things like changes of command, invocations and whatnot. So the mala bag comes out and gets set to the side. Those are all external. So the first thing that we would do, again, to kind of show you how this is done, I have, come on, play nice, my little cloth that I would put for, and this I would do in the field, like I would have this all set up in the field. So we have cloth. Here, for the field, I don't really have a kind of like raised seat, so I found a Buddha a little statue that is already raised, so we don't have to worry about that. Now, I'm going to put him in that corner. Yes, I know, I'm putting the Buddha in the corner. Let's just take everything out while we're at it. Okay, so in the field, this would get this sometimes gets a little bit finicky. So we have, again, the holders for the for the flowers. And we have the flowers. Yay! Now in the field, these usually don't stay up, but I try as best I can, right? The bottom here is weighted for that purpose. And this, once again, is just to show the value of, that I see the value of the teaching, and that I'm willing to, I choose to practice it, and I choose to honor the Buddha who gives us that teaching and his life. Now, here, because it is slightly harder to do so, I only carry around 3 and 4, and they're all fruit. Right? I don't have the space to put any of the cakes or whatnot. So we have our little 4 cherries. And our 3 strawberries, and we have our 2 candles, and instead of having a big giant thing for the incense, and this one's actually this one's open, that's the right one, we have a tiny little bell, or a tiny little holder that is weighted. This is actually significantly heavier than it looks, and we would put this right here, perfect for the incense holder. And the incense serves the same purpose, and if I had to see somebody off, I would simply put 1 incense and I had the small candles in here. It does not appear that I do at this time. So, normally I would. I appear to have taken them out. Now, obviously the lighter is there to light the incense and the candles, and I put that on one side, just to help me to kind of balance things out and to kind of show balance in how things are arranged. On the other side, I will always put the powdered incense, which I think I told you about or showed you guys some time ago, right? Powdered incense, 1, 2, 3, representing the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, right? Purifying the mind, purifying the mouth, the words, right? And then purifying the body. And that goes right over here. Our bell goes right here to hold things down. And then I would also have on this altar to hold things down some variation of the Dharma. This one is the wisdom of the Buddha. So we have the Buddha, we have the Dharma, and then we have the Sangha out here, right? Buddha, Dharma, and you guys. Well, you guys, me, all of us, we are the Sangha. We are all of us the Sangha. Now, anything else that I would have taken out of here? Nope. Nothing specific. Actually, that's not entirely true. I do have, from my home temple, I have a number of cards that are small teachings from various teachers within the tradition, that sometimes I will simply pull out, like I will, when I'm at work or when I'm in the field or whatever, I have these, I can simply pull one out and talk about whatever is on there or just reflect on it on my own, right? So let's go through and just pick a random one. There it is. This one's perfect. And so one of the teachers in our tradition teaches the following, right? And so sometimes, like, again, I'll just reflect on these, and it's totally okay if you like to teach them as well. And the thing that he is teaching is gratitude is the first step towards enlightenment. When we are grateful to our parents and mentors, we also begin to feel the great loving embrace of Buddhas that encourages us to be our best selves. Walking that road will surely set us free from karma. Okay. Right? And so, maybe that's actually a good one to kind of end with. I am going to, for the purposes of today, I'm not going to do a specific meditation. I had thought about it, but I think I'm going to let you guys meditate on your own. Again, the point here, right? The reason why we have all the things that we do on the altar is actually not too far from that specific sense of gratitude, right? That sense that, hey, we're getting something special with this teaching. But let's talk about the other thing, the other side of this, right? How much of this is actually 100% necessary? How much of this do you have to have for it to be Buddhist? How much of this do you have to put up there to practice the Dharma? It's a good question, right? So yes, everything up there is intentionally put there. Everything up there has a purpose, has a point, has a meaning, and is there for a reason. But does that necessarily mean that you or I or any Buddhist has to put all of these things up there? No. And again, I mentioned that earlier when I talked about, like, the Pure Land school will set their altar up a certain way. The Zen school will set theirs up a slightly different way. The Tibetan school is gonna do their things a certain way. The Japanese Vajrayana, the Shingon, and the Tendai, they're gonna do things a slightly different way. The Theravada side of the house is gonna do things a slightly different way. All of these things work, and all of these things are valid. It's what you intentionally choose to do, right? What you intentionally choose to put up there. Do you have to put up specific fruits? No. Do you have to put up specific cakes? No. Do you have to have a very specific type of incense? No. The reasons why we choose the ones that we do is because they traditionally, like with the fruits and with the other offerings, they were really expensive. So it was a gesture of gratitude, a gesture of kindness, a gesture of respect for the teaching, to say, I'm willing to give this to make sure that whatever is going on there, whatever you're providing, right, that whatever teachings you're providing are properly recognized, right? I'm choosing to put these up here because they are special, because they have value. And I recognize that what you are offering also has value, right? This is kind of a weird way of doing namaste, but right? So, does anything in here really have to be here? No. Your altar can look however you want, as long as it is intentional, as long as you are deliberately choosing what you put out. And that's important, right? Because we can do the same thing with our lives. In your life, you can choose what you put out and what you allow to, like, if this is your life, if the altar is a kind of a symbolic representation of the universe, which is what it's supposed to be, ultimately. If you look at it from a religious studies standpoint, the altar is usually seen as a microcosm of the universe as a whole, right? A lot of times churches and other buildings will be very similar, right? So you can see this in places like Angkor Wat, where the entire structure, to include all of the waterways around it, are designed specifically to kind of indicate a universe, right? The entire universe. And in that universe, there are these specific things, with Angkor Wat being kind of like a version of Mount Meru. At least by some people's definitions, right? So this is my little field universe, my little representation of the universe, and in a field setting. So what do I put into the universe? What do I allow into my little universe, both in the field and over here? What do I allow into the universe, the altar? And what should be there? What needs to be there? What has to be there? What is useful to be there? What parts do I not need there? What things would not serve any purpose or have any value in the altar, in that universe? What things can I take out of that and still have, still get at the things that I'm trying to get at, and what can I take out and still be intentional about? No, I'm not trying to Marie Kondo this whole thing, right? I'm Anybody who's seen how I live knows that I don't do minimalism. I don't do her kind of like, well, if you're not using it, get rid of it, right? There are sometimes points to keeping something even if you don't currently have a use for it. Not always, right? I'm not a hoarder, and I don't recommend hoarding because that is in fact some would argue that is in fact a mental illness of its own. I'm not going to argue that point, but I'm also not going to say that hoarding is a good idea. We definitely don't want to do that. We do want to look at what value these things have in our lives, right? We especially with the altar, it's a nice little representation of, this is our outer universe represented symbolically, but it's also our inner universe represented symbolically, right? And so we can look at what in our inner universe, what in our world, what parts of our world do we want to keep? What parts of the things around us, what parts of what we're doing and how we're acting in the world, what parts of those actually matter? What parts of those actions still have value? And here I think Marie Kondo probably has it right. If it doesn't have value, if it doesn't have purpose, consider whether it has any point. If there's a point in keeping it, because it might have value later, you don't know. If there's a point in keeping whatever it is in your life, keep it. If it is not helpful, if it is not useful, if it is not skillful, if it is not wholesome, don't. Right? Let's go back and reuse those criteria that the Buddha gave us, right? So for a moral action, it has to be wholesome, it has to be blameless, it has to be skillful, and it has to be praised by the wise. So if it's not wholesome, if it's not causing you to grow or to develop, if it's not something that is going to provide useful development and growth, is it worth keeping? If it's not skillful, if it's not done by the best method, is it worth keeping? If it's not blameless, right? If 5 years from now you're going to go back and blame yourself for doing it, why do it? Why keep it, right? And if it's not praised by the wise, why keep it, right? Think about that as you're looking at not just your altar, but your inner universe. Look at what's going on in your inner universe, in your inner world, and ask yourself, how much of this actually matters? How much of this, if I got rid of it, would not impact me at all, would not change who I am? How much of it, if I got rid of it, would actually help me, right? And how much of it do I need to keep because these things are great reminders for me to learn from? All of these things are considerations that we need to put into it, and we need to be very intentional about what we do and how we do it and why we do it. So, I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. I don't know, maybe I'll get some, we'll do some closeout chanting. I know we didn't open with the chanting, and that's totally okay. But we'll do some closeout chanting, and then we'll get back to all of the many things of the world, right? As I sit here and puzzle and ponder over, okay, how much of this is useful in my life, right? I want you guys to do the same. How much of what you're doing is in fact worth doing? And if it is, are you doing it intentionally? Are you choosing to do it, right? Are you choosing the things that make you a better person? So, okay. I do believe I am just going to leave everything right where it is. We will go ahead and do the closeout chanting from here. All right, Dharma Boots, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time, and I well, I don't know that I'll be out of the field I don't know that I'll be out of the field next week, but I will try to have the meaning behind the Buddhist flag, the so-called Buddhist flag, for next time. And we will also probably try to get in at least one more of the nuns. I might just call in a Pema Chodron day. But yeah, for now, thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Oh, we got another comment. You too. Take care.